Hello, everyone. It's Martha Novak, and I'm so glad to be talking with you today. This is Blog Talk Radio. We're also broadcast over Facebook Live, and the show is Real Talk with Martha Novak. We're talking about something really important today, and we're probably going to have this be a series because there's lots to say. And the subject is vulnerability. I wrote in some blurbs about this earlier for my office that there's no word that has us shaking in our boots like the word vulnerability. We don't really understand what it is. You keep in mind hello, how are you, dear heart? I'm so glad. Yeah, guys, those of you that are on radio, you don't see what I'm seeing on Facebook Live, but dear friends are writing in, and new friends are writing in, and I am just so glad. So, Mark, thank you for joining us. Anyway, no word has us shaking in our boots like vulnerability, and we don't really understand it. One of the things I want you to understand is that, and hello, Kat. Oh, I'm so glad you're with us today. Is that the ego child's mind interprets all the words of the world usually differently from the highest self mind. And of course, we're going from the fear-based egoic child's mind to the love-based mind that certainly is the global thinker and the one that is more aligned with the pure energies of God that we are. We are the aspect of that known as us. So we're going to try to start getting all of this straight about vulnerability. Now, I want to generally talk about it today, and then I'm going to give you a tip at the end that's going to start opening the door. Next week, we are going to talk about how to open the door in deeper ways, but this is just to get your feet wet, this exercise that I'm going to give you all. And it's a very easy one, so stick with me, okay? You keep in mind that nobody is really can hurt you in terms of all of us that do this kind of work. And the reason is that you have the ability to open this door or not, you see. So I can't force anything open for you, nor would I ever, by the way. That is certainly not my intention. I'm a guide, and I'm here to say this is the way it looks on one side, and here it is on the other, and it's better there, and to give you some suggestions, certainly, and recommendations to get you going. One of the things that always worried me about this kind of work is that everybody tells us what to do, but nobody tells us how to do it. And because my life work has been a path to the consciousness that we talk about and exploring it all along the way, I do have suggestions that hopefully might help you. And certainly that's my intention. All right, why don't we start off with a prayer, because I like to get get myself all centered and ready for you. This is a live show, by the way, and our number is 347-850-1647 if you'd like to talk to me. And if you don't, that's just fine. I'm going to plow on with our discussion today. But always know I care about what you think, and want to answer any questions that you have. So here we go. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are, and all everything is, we thank you so much as we come together under the banner of loving you, being curious about you, wanting to know more about us, and the aspect of love and being that you are in us. We seek being one with the world, even if we don't know we seek being one with the world. We belong to this family of human beings who are trying. We thank you so much, dear God, for all of this. We now listen to the show and participate in the show, whether we speak or not, by saying certainly as a first step, we know nothing. For it is the you through us and through all things that know it all. For these 90 minutes, maybe longer, we listen to that. And we so give thanks for the perfection of it all, even if we don't yet believe in it. We thank you for it all. There's a system here. And we seek being able to work in it more deeply and in love. And so it is. Amen. Well, we have a whole bunch of phone calls here all of a sudden. So why don't we take those first? You know, I'm always interested in talking with you first, and then I'm delighted to give you the information that I have written. But I think your voice is very important because each one of you that call in speak for us all and an aspect of us all. So I'm going to go to that. We will eventually get to this material. The nice thing about having your own radio show is you can kind of stretch it out if you need to, or do it all at one time, or whatever you need. So let's go to our first call. This is a 773 exchange. So let's go to this person. Let's hope I can bring them on. Hang on, it's coming.
Hello.
Hi. This is a 773 exchange. Is that to whom I'm speaking?
Yes.
Oh, good. What's your first name?
Nancy.
Nancy. Hello, Nancy. I'm Martha Novak. It's nice to talk with you. And hello, Julia. Another friend of mine has just clicked in on the Facebook Live, so I was just acknowledging her. Nancy, what can we do for you? What would you like to talk about today?
Well, I'm just interested in talking about breaking patterns.
Well, that's a good one to talk about. I'm all for that. Tell me about this in whatever questions or comments you have about it, and I'll see if I can help or use it as a teaching aid or whatever I'm supposed to do here, which I never know until you start talking. So where do you want to go?
Okay, well, no, it's just about, it seems that even when you get around new surroundings, for me, it seems I have the same drama.
Oh, yes. It's because the drama is inside of you, my darling, and whatever is inside of us is reflected on the outside, so it's just there for us to pick up. So I understand that. So keep going.
No, that's what I'm curious on how to break those patterns in and on how to actually make substantive change.
Good. All right. Well, let's talk about that. And I want to put on the table first, Nancy, that I'm going to give you some powerful generalized information right now. And this is true for everybody. But the real ability to break these... What, darling? But the real ability to break these patterns is to find out what specifically you're doing. And that requires tuning in to you and not publicizing that over the radio. You understand? That's a very private thing that must be done between people. So I'm going to give you some basic information, and I'll venture into the personal territory as much as I feel like would not be intrusive for you and to publicize, okay? All right, so Nancy.
Okay.
All of you participates in bringing your patterns in. If you've listened to this show before, and if you haven't, let me just say this. we work with two parts of you. One is the egoic child's mind. It develops about 18 months old. It comes along with the development of the ego. All children are not born with that ego. And before that time, all time is now for the child. And so you form the opinions that if something bad happens, it's going to last forever. So when the ego in the ego child's mind comes along, it's a defense mechanism against anything that you interpreted as uncomfortable and bad or scary. And it gets put in place. And the ego in the ego child's mind starts projecting in the future because it's trying to scan for things that hurt you in the past. So already you've got something formed that says there are things that are out there that are going to hurt me. All right. That's actually not true. What's real, and that's based on appearances, because we are, as children, we don't have any kind of, we are the undeveloped whole, not the developed whole that happens when we study consciousness and become more and more and more conscious and even enlightened if we go far enough. So what happens is that you are looking for things that hurt you out there. The assumption is there are going to be those things that are like the past. Now keep in mind that the ego child's mind is projected in the future based on the past, so it's all about the past, and what it's not about is right now. So all of these wonderful things you hear about mindfulness and staying in the moment, they're all lovely, and that's eventually what happens when you wake up in consciousness. The problem is nobody can do it. And you shouldn't be able to do it in the beginning, because you should be looking at why the system is set up and what the specific issues were in the past that we need to break energetically so you don't keep creating them in the future, because the very fact that you are afraid of them coming along means that you're creating some aspect of those. Do you understand? It's like you cannot be defensive without having an attack. It doesn't work, right? So we have to find out specifically what's going on. Now, Julia's talking to me a minute. Hang on just a sec, Nancy. My Facebook feed keeps cutting out, so I'm going to listen on Blog Talk Radio. Yes, let me say that to everybody. I think that if I'm up here in the remote hills, and we have as fast a speed as we possibly can for the internet, but sometimes it isn't fast enough, and it is kind of rainy and bleak today. So I think that sometimes we have what we've got. So thank you very much. If you go to my website, which is marthanovak.com, you can you'll see a couple of buttons under radio shows, and you can toggle back and forth between Facebook Live and Blog Talk Radio and not miss anything. I hate that happens sometimes. Sometimes it stays up the whole time, sometimes not. Okay, and sometimes I'm told that it's cut out, and sometimes not, like this time. All right, back to you, Nancy. So what we're saying here, my dear, is that you are writing a script of your life, and because you're working off the old ego child's mind script that you started when you were young, you're repeating the same patterns. Now, what do I mean by all of you as participating in this? The reason these things are so entrenched and, well, that's odd. Julia, Blog Talk Radio is only playing music and not your... No, baby, it's fine. She's apologizing for the interruption. I don't know what's going on. I'm just sitting here doing my radio show. So... there might be, Julia, a delay, so keep listening to that. Let me know what happens. She's saying that they're playing music and not the live show. The music may lead into the live show. Let's see if there's a delay. Okay, Julia? Nancy, so what is happening when I say all of you is participating in this is this. Your ego child's mind expects the pattern. Okay, it creates the pattern over and over again. It may not make you happy, but the thing is, the ego child's mind likes familiarity. At least you know where the rocks in the water are, right? So it thinks it's keeping you safe by doing that, because the thing that is really scary to the ego child's mind is the unknown, the new, by the way, the expansive, the limitless, the new wonderful choices. That's all real scary because this is the child's mind at play here. Now, here's the rub. The higher self participates in bringing in the same old patterns too. The higher self being the love-based self, this marvelous being of you that is, certainly transcendent and certainly knows better. But it's participating in bringing in the old patterns too. Why? So you'll break them. So you just can't avoid these patterns. Now, what you can do is get to work on them so we can specifically unlock you from some of these old things. Then you start creating something differently. Then you don't expect the same old things anymore. Then you don't position yourself subconsciously to get those, you see? Now, I am being very general with both these things because specifically there are things that are in you that we have inherited, that we are genetically disposed to, not that genetics control everything, that we own now, but they really belong to our mothers and fathers and the way they believed, and we've taken it on. And because we have energetically taken on, they may not have even said this verbally to us, we're living it until we go, wait a minute, and we bring all this to consciousness and say, that's not my life. I don't want to do that. So there are a lot of influences that we've got to look at: mental, emotional, physical, and energetic, spiritual. And there are ways that we, that at least in my program and other people's programs, I'm sure do similar things, if not certainly the exact thing, because this program came out of me. We unhook you from those things. So when we find something energetic, that you see, what is going to happen ultimately is as we release issues in the emotional body, so that only the things that belong in the emotional body are there, like awe, forgiveness, deep compassion, love, and even the possibility of unconditional love, joy, all sorts of marvelous things that should belong in the emotional body. We are releasing the things that don't belong there. Well, where does that go? It goes into the spiritual body. So the spiritual body's got to be integrous as well to be able to hold that energy. What if you have miasms, which are leaks in the energy field? What if you have mixed energy with the father, or suppression of the energy of the chi? There are things that we've got to adjust there too, so it can hold the energy that's coming into it. And what happens is with work over a period of time, you wake up to who you really are as a spiritual being in physical form, and not a physical being just trying to endure life. You see, this is how it works. For you to call like this is probably one of the smartest questions I've ever heard, and certainly it's not an easy answer. But you're asking, how does all this work? So you have opened the door for me. Thank you very much, my darling, and for everybody else as well. Now, one other point, and then you may take me anywhere you want to go. You are writing right now a script. You are writing the script of your life. If you have kids or animals, or if you love someone very dearly, and you were charged with writing their script, which of course you cannot, you wouldn't put disappointment and love and heartbreak and betrayal and all the things that can really plague human beings, right? You wouldn't write that for them. You love them. You love them. So you would write a better script. But darling, by the nature of your question, you are writing the script for yourself like that. So we've got to find out why. Because the end of the script goes with that script. You cannot change the end. You have to change the script to get a different end. Do you understand that?
Yes.
There you go. So, if you will, darlings, I never want to, this is not a forum. This is a forum to teach and to help. on the radio. It is not a forum to go out there and, say, work with us. If anybody recognizes that we are their teacher, we've got a wonderful program set up for you, and we can deal with people all over the world. Energy works remotely just as well as it works if you're sitting in the green chair opposite me. So it really doesn't matter. There are, if you'd like to read about our program, go to marthanovak.com, read about our program. I'm available. There's certainly healers that are available, and we can help you specifically break these patterns. I'm doing the best I can do in a general way, but we get pretty specific. We get absolutely into your life, and these sessions are 2 hours long, and they are intense. And it's marvelous because then these patterns start breaking up. So by all means, if you're interested, look at that. But if you are interested in another healer, I wish you well, and go look at that as well. We're all trying to help in our way and according to our own understanding, So where would you like to take us? And then I see the other call, so don't get impatient with me, 519. Yes, darling. Is there anything else you'd like to ask?
No, this was really helpful. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nancy. I do care that you have a happy life. It's interesting because I've noticed for years that there is a spiritual level of connection with people that has nothing to do with whether we have known each other or see each other's face or really anything. It's like you walk into a room and you go, there you are, And I often feel that about people. I certainly feel that about you. And you do well out there. But you're a very intelligent person. And I think you're being called to this work, not this specific work, but to higher consciousness work. So I wish you great success with it. It is a marvelous experience. All of our lives over time change. There isn't anybody that I have trained who are on our website who will not say their lives are immensely better, and I wish that for yours. Okay?
Thank you so much.
All right, darling. Take care.
Thanks. Hop over to your website now.
Oh, good. Great. Take care now. I hope to hear from you again. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Let's go to our next caller. This is a 519 exchange. To whom am I speaking?
Hi, Martha. It's Jennifer. I'm just listening in.
Okay.
One caller said it just sounds like music on your online show on Blog Talk.
Well, I'm so glad that you did call in. And guys, I don't know what the music is about. This is not good that there's music. And it's not being generated by me. So thank you very much, darling. Jennifer, that's just great. Jump in there as a conversation if there is something on your mind. And for all of you all that are trying to listen on Blog Talk Radio, and our only other choice here is to come in live and on the air like Jennifer. The number is 347-850-1647. I absolutely don't mind leaving the line open if it works to do that. I'm not a technical person, guys. I apologize about that. I'm just perfectly dreadful about anything technical. It's a big joke among all my friends. But I don't quite know how this works and why that's happening. Certainly the powers that be will investigate this after I get off the air. So I don't know what to say. We'll try to make this work. But anyway, thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate it. Okay.
Thanks, Martha.
Thank you. And jump in there, guys. As long as you're on the air, you might as well say what you want. Okay. So jump in there when you need to. All right. Now, let's go into our talk on vulnerability, because I think this is such an important topic. I think if all of us were vulnerable and handled it the right way, because vulnerability, certainly from the highest self, is a magnificent thing that unites the world, this would be quite a different place. Those of you that are the standard bearers of consciousness and holding that interest and that exploration, I think this is a real important show for you. All right. So let's talk about what is vulnerability. Let's just start there. Now, I got this off the internet, and it says it is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure, even fear of emotional exposure. You don't have to be emotionally exposed, right? You can just fear being emotionally exposed and still have your vulnerability triggered. Now, it's interesting because these are, whoever wrote that, wrote it from the ego child's mind's perspective. This word is more just about than anything really shows the difference that the ego child's mind would tell you is the definition of vulnerability, and the higher self. Quite a difference. Let's talk about that. Uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure, or the fear of emotional exposure. It is the core of all emotions and feelings, vulnerability. And to be vulnerable is to have the strength to experience natural human emotions. That's lovely. But what is your ego child's mind telling you? Tune into yourself right now. If you found yourself clenching, anxious, carrying tension in some part of your body, ready to turn the program off to listen, you say to yourself, another day. Your ego child's mind is telling you that this is dangerous. Listening is dangerous. That vulnerability will lead you, and here is an important breakdown. Vulnerability will lead you, talking about this will lead you to shame, and shame is going to lead you to being hurt. That's usually the breakdown for vulnerability. Vulnerability leads to shame, leads to being hurt. The ego child's mind tells you that your vulnerability is a weakness and that you should be ashamed of it and that you should hide it. Cover it up with all sorts of yummy things. We'll talk about those yummy things in a minute. Here's the problem. They're yummy only when you're using them. They make you feel better in the moment. They relieve you in the moment. But they are self-destructive to your growth in your overall life and ultimately to your happiness because you don't know how to handle these things. And happiness comes when you know how to handle things so you can relax and you know everything's all right. You see, we have to learn to work through things. Guys, I'm going to go to a 917 exchange because we have another call. We'll come back to vulnerability in just a moment. And I don't know whether this person is listening or whether this person wants to talk. So let's just find out. Hang on just a minute. Hello, this is 917 exchange. I'm speaking with. Hi, who am I speaking with? Yes, I'm doing fine. How about you? You all right? Are you there?
Listening, okay?
Oh, yes. If you're just listening, that's just fine, darling. Absolutely. There's something wrong with Blog Talk Radio today, so by all means, listen. No problem. What's your name, though, by the way? Lindsay. Well, hello, Lindsay, and welcome. We're glad to have you with us. And I say the same thing to you that I said to Jennifer. If you guys need to pop in there with a comment or a question, by all means do. Otherwise, here we go with the show. I actually can think of no other word that polarizes the ego child's mind from the higher self more than the word vulnerability. It scares everybody. So today's show is about understanding it and why you do want it and how to go about getting it well so that you're okay and more than okay, and giving you a tip at the end so that you will start to use it. Okay? Okay. Lindsay. Lindsay,
Yes, you have to mute me.
Yes, please mute yourself, and that way.
I can't mute myself. You have the button there. Okay, I'll mute me on the phone.
Well, let's try it. I'll try to mute you. There we go. Lovely singing, though. All right, here we go. Let's talk about what we're talking. Let's go into more detail. I have a dear client that is actually making her way through all this even as we speak. Several weeks ago, she had something happen with a neighbor that was terrible, and it made her feel immensely vulnerable. So I asked her when she was relaying this story to me how she felt. She said she was angry, she was sad, she was disappointed in herself and them. She was tired of all the emotional turmoil and drama. And she felt she was being overly dramatic about this, and she was. By the way, I love working with clients who tell me what their problems are instead of me having to dig it out. She's a joy to work with. Okay. But as I was listening to this list, and this list, angry, sad, disappointment, tired of the drama, creating more drama, in your mind, do you realize these are ways to not feel vulnerable? You understand? Because she was leaving out something pretty essential. Something was missing. So there was something essential in her reaction that we needed to talk about. But she was leaving it out. So I kept probing, hoping that she would see that this was missing. But you know what she did instead is she emotionally shut down. You know, we all know what that's like. There was a blank. There was nothing there. Didn't get anything, right? Nada. All right. This is what one of the common things that the body does, by the way, when it perceives a threat is imminent. Now, there was no threat. No matter how she perceived it in her mind, it was just me. She's paying me to find these things for her, right? And I was just trying to help. I always am just trying to help. So after we probed for a while, I told her what was most glaring to me. And what it was that she had left out that this neighbor had deeply hurt her feelings. Hurt her feelings in quite a terrible way. It was a verbal and an emotional assault. Quite inappropriate, by the way. God knows where it came from. We don't know. She didn't even know this neighbor. This neighbor came out on the porch and started screaming at her. And the language the neighbor used, which my client then conveyed to me, oy vey, I don't hear women talk like that to other women. And I have a pretty colorful vocabulary when I get angry, but no, this was beyond the pale, huh? And so back to my client, she did not want to be vulnerable. So she denied her own hurt. She could admit she was angry, she was sad, she was disappointed, she was tired, and that she was being overly dramatic, they're all distractions from what's really bothering you, right? But she couldn't admit, and even when I asked her to say it, she could not even say what had struck her and devastated her, that it deeply hurt her, wounded her. She didn't want to go there. She struck this woman, this neighbor, had struck at the core of her vulnerability. In other radio shows, you've heard me say that there are only two things that ever upset us as human beings. Do you remember what they are? All right, I'm going to tell you, don't worry. But it's nice for me to challenge you once in a while and say, do you remember what these two things always are? Number one is not being cared about, perceiving that you're not cared about. And number 2 is you going to the belief that you will never get what you want. Every issue you'll ever have falls into these 2 categories. Every issue you will ever have falls into these 2 categories. You are perceiving it in one of these categories, or both of them, by the way. Sometimes when something really hurts you, it's hitting both of these very deep things in you. That nobody cares about you and that you'll never get what you want are core issues in every human being. And specific issues belong, good morning, Michelle. Glad you're with us. Specific issues belong in one of these categories or in both of them. You understand now? Okay. So this incident with the neighbor had hurt her at her core because here was someone who made it abundantly clear that she didn't care about her. Now you might ask, why would a neighbor, my client didn't even know, care about her? Because we all want to be cared about by our fellow human beings. It's an essential quality that we all have, and it is part of our vulnerability. It is part of our oneness. No, it is not reasonable. No, sometimes it doesn't even make sense because of not being reasonable. But it's there. And because most of us go through life wanting to care and be cared about by our fellow man, it makes us nice. I like this quality very much. But 2 stories come to mind. Another client of mine, a number of years ago, came in very, very angry one day. He had been cut off in traffic by a blue car, and quite dangerously so. This scared him. And so he covered up his vulnerability, his fear, with rage, right? This guy couldn't drive. You know, he should have been arrested, blah, 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 blah. And so I asked him to get quiet and still and tell me, and he had quite a lot of this therapy by that point, tell me what was so bothering him, other than the danger, about this incident. And it was wonderful because he got real quiet, and you could see this light bulb going off over his head. And then he said, quietly, because he didn't care about me, that this driver had done something egregious, of course, cutting him off in a dangerous manner, but that it had reminded him of a parent who he had perceived not caring about him, and there it was. There is a natural assumption that human beings care about one another. This is called in psychology a confirmation bias. When reality hits the fan that some people don't care about other people, it really can be quite devastating to all of us. I think about the serial killer Ted Bundy. By the way, stick with me, all this is going somewhere. I think about the serial killer Ted Bundy in this regard that we're talking about right now, about people that are not caring about other people. This man preyed on this lovely aspect of human nature we're talking about right now. We want to care about and be cared about by other people. This bias that all of us have inside of us. He pretended he'd broken his leg or he'd broken his arm and that he couldn't carry his books to his car. He'd get a young lady to help him, and while, as I understand it, while she was putting his books in his car, he'd bludgeon her in the back of the head and throw her in the car, and that was that. The rest is crime story history, isn't it? So what protects us in situations like this? Here I am saying vulnerability is a good thing. All right. And I'm telling you a story about Ted Bundy. Well, it's not my point, of course, to say that vulnerability is bad. I'm saying that we have something quite nice built into our system, which is this confirmation bias. Michelle is saying, oh darn, lots of broadcast interruptions on Facebook. Michelle, if you can hear me, several people are saying when they go to Blog Talk Radio, music is playing. So call in 347-850-1647. You will be on the air then, but you can listen, and I won't bother you if you call in. If I see your number appear, I won't bother you. We just need to mute you so we don't hear what's going on in your house, but you can listen directly as if you're talking to me on the phone, and certainly unmute yourself and come on back on the line if you have something you want to share, okay? That's the way to do this. I don't know anything else until we get off the show and investigate this in some way. I'm sorry you all are having trouble. Okay. So, I'm not saying that we should change this lovely characteristic of wanting to be cared for and caring for others. But what I am saying is that we should be in touch with our God-given discernment, which tells us something is wrong, and to back out of a situation before we get into it. The women who were brutalized by Ted Bundy overrode this feeling, and I am saying to you that you must not. You must not. If you will remove your issues, you will become more and more discerning. That's very important. And therefore, you get to keep your confirmation bias that everyone is wonderful and that you should care for them and they should care for you, but not override your discernment that says, not true in this case, don't go to the car. You understand with this person? Okay. Yes, but here's the rub. Discernment is a characteristic of the highest self. In the ego child's mind, what we do with this energy is we avoid, we withdraw, we isolate, all to protect ourselves instead of using discernment to protect us. And of course, my point is in saying that those things are not good to do because they're all fear-based, withdrawing, avoiding, isolating, getting angry, all that, instead of just being quiet and listening and discerning and not being involved in the first place. You see, to be happy, we can't avoid isolating and withdraw. We have to be a participant in life, contributing, caring, and being cared about. But not having a confirmation bias based in fantasy that everything is just hunky-dory. No, guys, life is a plethora of energies, high and low. So I say be a participant, contribute, care, and receive care, but be discerning. What I am saying is that if you learn to be more vulnerable, you'll have a happier life, but you have to take discernment along. So, let's talk about what are the other reasons that you would want to be more vulnerable. Because you already are. It's a natural part of you. And to deny it is to suppress your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual which are your energetic systems. It will cause you to live a lie and a series of lies. It will cause you to lie to yourself, deceive yourself. It will cause you to be unhappy. Because you are listening to the show and others like this show, because you seek a natural authenticity in the abiding energy of the aspect of the ascended God you are, this is your goal. And if you are heading in an energetic direction that is opposite this goal, or sideways from your intentions, you're not going to be happy doing that. You're going to experience anxiety. There's only one word for what you're doing to handle this and to tell yourself that everything's just fine and to leave you alone, and that's fantasy. We create fantasy because we're not going in the direction that we should be going. It's appalling, so we tell ourselves in fantasy that we're going there. We want to do it our way, right? We've got to be honest if we're going to do this. Emotionally honest. You do understand that fantasy is a lot of people's drug. It hits the opiate centers of the brain, just like heroin might, okay? It's often an addiction to this fantasy. And its hold on you can be broken. But it has to be broken, just like other addictions that human beings indulge in. We break it down here. We want reality and discernment and all the beneficence that these two things imply to take its place. Most of us have learned that reality is scary. It makes us vulnerable, right? We shut ourselves and our minds and our very beings to it, and we endure life. Instead of really getting so straight with it, we can have a dynamic one. You are, in your authenticity, supposed to love and be loved. You're supposed to do good work. You're supposed to contribute to society, connect with people, reach out, initiate, sometimes follow, add your talents, realize your virtues and bring them forth, be one of the light holders for the people who are struggling, and be authentic in your relationships, one-on-one or even with a group of people. If you quake in your boots from time to time, so be it. I want you all to know that whenever we are opening up a new level of us, everybody quakes in their boots. The whole thing is, do you chronically quake in your boots? If so, there's stuff to get beyond in the ego child's mind. There's certain, we've got to, and don't take that literally. We get beyond it, because that means that you have to deny it. The path that we're talking about to consciousness is to actually embrace all those things that you've been denying and avoiding. The irony about the esoteric journey is that the things that you seek are in what you're avoiding. For example, abundance is in the release of the fear of being poor or the fear of being rich. Your divinity and being one with this family of man, this oneness with all life, is in the embracing of your humanness. Not stopping there, but embracing it and seeing what's beyond, because there's always something beyond, right? That's the esoteric journey. When you quake in your boots, for whatever reason, because you have been living in the ego child's mind, or because you are experiencing growth and change, and by the way, opportunity in that. This is vulnerability, and everybody feels it. Everybody feels it from time to time, and sometimes all the time, as I've said. You've got to have courage, and interestingly, every human being was born with courage. Every human being is born with that. The whole reason you're listening to a show like this is not the ego child's mind. It is the highest self. You've got both of those things at play. Courage is a deep part of the highest self. It's there. You don't have to go out and seek courage. We just have to get the things that make us non-courageous and are fear-based resolved. A lot of people don't realize how courageous they are until they're tasked with moving through the wilderness. That story of Jesus in the wilderness when the devil comes to it, which I've got to tell you I don't believe in, the devil. I think that was just a lovely story. But the wilderness is real. You see? And we have got to bring up our courage. Then you realize, if you are open to the highest self, that God has always been right there to open to, and that you and God are one, and that you are not alone. You never have been alone. Never will be alone. While everyone wants to believe this, your personal journey is to prove that that is true to yourself. Now, here's the happy life. When you prove that long before your deathbed and start living that, because at the moment of our physical deaths, one of the reasons that we fight and linger is because we want the ego to save us, and the ego is not going to win that battle. Death is going to win, because that's the inevitable result for all of us, right? And by the way, I'm told that it's nothing scarier than going from room to room to the person that is dying and who is cooperating. It's us who are left that make it terribly dramatic. Let's not do that. So, assimilating, resolving your fear gives you not only a happier life, but a happier death as well when that time comes. And of course, that's a long time from now. Vulnerability is also part of real, genuine love. It helps you grow and deepen through the years with your partner. When I'm talking to couples, I often use an image I'm about to give you. So, each of you sees something different, feels differently about some sort of subject. And you argue about it, or worse, you secretly hold resentments of the other person. All right? So, the image I want you to understand is that you're on a pole, and so is your partner. These poles are on the periphery of a big old field. There you are, and there's the partner. Each of you is clinging to your own pole. This is your mental, emotional position at this pole. To resolve the problem, though, and the reason that you all separated to begin with, is a process. First of all, when you're at the poles, each of you must state your case. There's no place to do this but at the poles. You feel that you are right and the other person is wrong. Hence the separation, right? But the solution to whatever the problem is doesn't lie at the pole you're clinging to. The only thing there is your position and your being right. And of course, the partner's position that they feel the same way about is all the way across the field. Where the solution lies is in the middle. And to go to that mental, emotional, and now physical position is to surrender your pole and move to the center. This takes vulnerability, emotional vulnerability, and in that, courage to come off your pole. By the way, this does not mean in any way that you're weak, this vulnerability. On the contrary, moving off your pole into the center takes great courage. By the way, most people don't know how to do this or are afraid to do this. And they feel that their sense of self will just fall apart if they're not right. That's an issue. We ought to get rid of that, because you won't be able to do this marvelous exercise in connecting with another person, particularly an intimate partner, if we can't get off our pole. This results in unhappiness. When my husband and I argue, and we do occasionally because we are very different people, here's what we do. If you would like to write these tips down, I'm delighted. And if they don't help you, well, I'm sorry to waste your time. But these things certainly help us. Number one, when we're at these polls, we state our case to each other. I feel this way. I feel this way, we say. Number two, we give each other time to assimilate what the other has said. So we move away from each other, knowing that we'll come back and talk about it. I process emotion in about 2 hours. My husband processes emotion in about 12 hours. So these little adages that society is so fond of, like never go to bed angry, to me and my way of thinking is bull. Because if this is going on at nighttime, you damn well better believe that we're going to go to bed angry and assimilate all of this and wake up and then be able to talk about it. So don't believe these things that society throws around. You do what's real and what you have to do and what he has to do or she has to do. 3, my husband and I make ourselves happy in the meantime, because we know this is not the end of the world that we are arguing with each other just because we disagree. When we made the commitment to each other to be married, we said we would never forget, and we only forget in those few little moments that we're arguing, that love is a privilege. Are you going to hold that with each other or not? That love is a privilege. There isn't anything that is important enough to break that for us. And then we also have decided that we are not going to be unhappy and that we are not going to divorce. And so the only thing to do is to find our way through the problem to a mutually happy and beneficial place, to a solution that we both agree to. By the way, that solution does not lie at my pole or his pole. There is a truth beyond both of us. That's God's truth. That's what's in the center of the field. You understand? So, number 4, we come together at that time and talk about it. To do that, we have to be emotionally naked. We have to be vulnerable. We have to come and we have to say, here's the way I interpreted that. Here's the way I interpreted that. And it usually results in the fact that we go, oh, well, look that. It was a misunderstanding. Or look at that, we have a different way of dealing with that. And I'm not going to be necessarily doing that because I don't think that's important, but I'm just loving it that you think that's important. So I support you totally. And by all means do that. You've heard me talk about stacking the pans before, which was an early argument of ours. We certainly don't argue about that anymore. I'm in a hurry. I want to get to work. My work has been important to me my whole life. I want to write. I want to talk to you. I want to do my sessions. I need to do those things. I need to keep the household running. I need to, I enjoy cooking the meals. He does it sometimes, but I really do enjoy that. You know, it's life, isn't it? Right? So Michael, who is retired, really likes order. He likes stacking the pans in our cabinet so that you have the great big ones all the way to the little bitty ones that are the little butter pans, right? He likes doing that. I throw them in there. They're still in there. I throw them in there. I don't want to take my time. I want to do other things with my time. Who's right and who's wrong? Actually, we both are right and we both are wrong. We're only wrong if we're trying to make the other person do something when they prefer something else. This is the why we throw the word lazy around. Do you understand there is no such thing as somebody being lazy? There's no such thing as you being lazy. So absolve yourself of that. What you're doing is something else that's more important with your energy. You are doing something with your energy that's more important to you than going that way, where you think you should go. I'd look at your should. Is your should valid? Is your should even appropriate? Is it based on a standard that you don't need anymore? You see? Okay. Number 5. We will decide on a policy, a new way of doing things. As far as the pans are concerned, when Michael has time and is so inclined, he stacks them. Oh, do I appreciate that? Absolutely I do. Am I going to do it? No, I'm going to do something else. Fixed the problem, didn't it? It sure did. See, many of our arguments, everybody's arguments, are based on we want you to do something else. We want you to do this. Well, give that up. Stop being, trying to impose what you want on someone else. Let's just have you live your life and let them live theirs and come to some mutual policies here, some mutual conclusions. He's happy stacking the pans. He knows how much I appreciate it. He doesn't do it always. I don't care. And he lets me alone because I'm not going to stack the pans. And he appreciates me for other things. You see? So we go on with the new policy, the new solution that we both honor. And the nice thing is number 6. You never have to argue about it again. You never have to argue about it again. Now, I know that some of you all have very complicated relationships, and they're more complicated than the one I've just said. Sometimes you are married to people that are children and are emotionally immature and have no interest in being anything but. And I say to you all, first of all, I'm sorry. Second of all, you need to go and see what your responsibility is and what theirs is with some sort of therapist. You need to work on your own issues energetically and emotionally alone, in addition. And if you decide that you will have another partner, you need to break some of these old patterns so you don't attract the same thing again. Because as our darling Nancy said, she's attracting this, and it wasn't necessarily about a partner. I don't mean to imply that. But you attract the same patterns again and again until you break them. You see? Then it becomes, make sure that you choose better next time. One of the really important things when you are choosing a partner, I know I'm off the subject a little bit, but one of the really important things is to make sure They are committed to the same things you are. I knew Michael was committed to not doing anything else but working through the problem with me. That he was going to hold that sacred space where love was a privilege, and we were going to do whatever we could do about that. We were not going to be unhappy, and we certainly weren't going to separate. It leaves only one thing to do, which is fix it. Fix the problem. And to do that, you have to come off your pole to the center, being vulnerable, giving up your position, finding out what the larger truth is that you all both could agree with. Okay. If this scares you to smithereens, then there's more to develop in you. All of this I talk about on these radio shows is in you. All of this wonderful stuff that I say you're capable of. It is. But we all have issues in the way. Your issues are what you're using over and over again. And this is what I want you to know. Each time you use these issues to cope with life, to endure life, you are convincing yourself that there's nothing to do but continue to use them, and there are no other choices, no other options. You are telling yourself every time you do this. Hello, sweetheart. Lisa, I'm so glad you're here. Oh, thank you so much, darling. I love you too. Thank you. Thank you. My point being, and I think this is important enough to say again, every time you use an issue, no matter what it is, you are convincing yourself that there are no other options but to use it. This is how your issues become entrenched. You understand? This is how your issues become entrenched. So there you are. What if you work on yourself with someone? Because you have to have someone to help you with this, guys. I hear a lot of people say, I'll do this by myself. You can't do it by yourself. You can do it by yourself up to a certain point. But here's the thing. Your ego child's mind does not want you to change. It's going to not let you see what you need to get through. Why? Because the ego child's mind has been charged with saving you, saving your life, making sense of your world. Because if you don't make sense of your world as a child, you die. Right? It's a way to keep yourself intact as much as possible. It tells you to bury your feelings, bury yourself, hide, because somebody will hurt you. It has all these marvelous devices. When somebody gets too close, you rage, or any of the other things, because you're vulnerable. It wants you to stay alive. It doesn't care if you're happy. And that's a really important thing for you to realize, so that you can say, I want to get beyond this ego child's mind and what's telling us. It doesn't care if you're happy. It just wants you alive. Now, that was very important before you were 7 years old. When you were a kid and you were trying to figure all this out, your job back then was to stay alive. You have survived already. Now, it's time to start on this journey, later soon, from the fear-based self to the love-based self, so you can have a happier and more fulfilling and abundant life. This is how it works. If you're still working from a survival mechanism, the fear-based self, all you're going to be doing in the present time is trying to survive and projecting into the future based on the past. This is really all about the past. Your decisions that you are making, so right now, will be the decisions that you've always made. And if you say, that's just not true, I'm doing this instead, look at your motivation underneath, because it's not what you're doing on the surface, it's your motivation that gives you the real answer there about what you're doing. You can't protect yourself at the expense of living. You see? Yes, Lisa, I'm so sorry. Lisa is communicating with me and saying there are a lot of interruptions on Facebook Live today. She says, I will watch later. I really want to hear this. I understand that, Lisa. And Lisa, before you tune out, you can call on 347-850-1647. This is the online line. I am not answering it when people call in, because some people are calling in on that line so they can hear me live, because apparently for some reason they're playing music on Blog Talk Radio. Don't ask me why, instead of my radio show. And Facebook Live is going in and out. That is not being communicated to me. So this is, you all are kind enough to tell me what's happening out there. I appreciate it. But you can call, I say this to everybody, 347-850-1647. I will not bring you on the air, but that's a real good way for you to hear the rest of the show. We've only got 19 minutes anyway. So this is why you want to have someone work on this with you, because the ego child's mind just wants you to be alive and hold you in one place. It tells you that all of your limitations that you have learned to live within are good because it kept you alive. That's all it's going to do. I'm here to tell you there's a lot more out there, but you're going to have to prove it to yourself. So a good guide, someone who is actually conscious and doing the work themselves and has been through all this, is critical. You can find me through my website. You can find some of my wonderful healer facilitators. Yes, thank you, darling. Lisa said she'll do that. You can find that on my website, which is Martha Novak, Novak.com. Okay. So what if you find yourself really able to, with the help of someone else, confront these old limitations? What if you're resolving them and moving beyond them? What if you find yourself for the first time really relaxing, genuinely relaxing with people, and listening more and more to your highest self, and having a dawning revelation that everything, no matter what, is all right? Wow. What if you surrender having to be right all the time and opt for being loving and kind? More loving and kind than you've ever been in your life. What if there was a solution to everything and you find them and you go on with being happy and fulfilled? That's what consciousness does. It does indeed. This is the conscious life we're talking about. This is the reason you're listening to a show like this. Everybody wants this life. So, we're going to talk about what to do to get there. And that'll be the rest of this show. And by the way, next week as well. First, let's talk more about vulnerability and why you want it. I have to show you how great it is before you'll even begin to go there, right? Vulnerability is the rapport with all life, with all people, with all animals, with nature, with other cultures. Everybody has it. Everybody feels it. And if we can stop being afraid of it, this is where compassion lies. Self-compassion and compassion for everyone else. The world would be different if we would allow it to be more vulnerable. You all are the standard bearers listening to a show like this, you see? We'll talk more about this, because in no way, shape, or form am I doing this show to put you in danger. I'm going to be telling you various things. Just like the beginning of the show, I said, be more discerning, right? Have to go on this journey with discernment. Vulnerability is the opening to God, the ascended God. Because God presents two ways, you've heard me say this before, as the fear-based self, according to our understanding, and as the love-based self, according to our understanding. Everything is God, you, and everything else, either fear-based or love-based, or somewhere in between, right? So vulnerability is the opening to the higher aspects of God as who we are. It's opening the privilege of saying, I don't have all the answers, the absolute belief, and relief, I should say, the relief of saying, I know absolutely nothing. But far from being left confused and alone, it is the opening through which God comes. God comes from the outside, certainly, the job you want, the money that you're making or will make, the love you receive from your partner. Thank you. That's all lovely. But more importantly, God comes through the opening from within you. Because most people, because of their issues, don't allow God to come through to the extent it's capable of doing. And now you've opened the box to the beneficence of God, and when you allow this to start being unearthed in you beyond your issues, you become aware of the absolute privilege of living and loving, to the absolute knowing that God is everything, and that everything, no matter what, is 100% all right, because God is there, and you are never going to be alone again. Now, there's a woman that you can read about. She's marvelous. Her name is Brené Brown, and she's a foremost authority on vulnerability. She has a wonderful quote here. I want to read it to you before we go into the next part. Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose and deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. I would agree with that. Okay, so now, how do you do it? And this is what I want to leave you with. How do you do it? This one point. And then we're going to talk a lot more next week about the same thing. How do you do it? Brené Brown says, and I think this is a wonderful quote, you must connect with the right person at the right time about the right issue. Now, here's my exercise for you. List your friends. I want you to actually deliberately and consciously take a piece of paper and list the friends that you have great relationship with and you can trust completely, who accept all of you. Let's start with that list. You know, keep in mind that relationships are an exchange of energy, not necessarily exchanging the same thing, not necessarily exchanging the same at the same time. It can be friendship from friendship. It can be a love for love in an intimate way. It can be time for money. You know, I mean, my clients pay me for 2 hours of what I do for them, right? Of healing, of deeper insights of their psychology, of how we're wired, of lifting them, their burdens off of them. That's an exchange. That's a relationship. So first, as you're making this list, make sure there is some sort of energy being exchanged, or you don't have a relationship except in fantasy. And we've got to be honest with ourselves. This has got to be a mutually supportive relationship, and a relationship that exchanges energy. List the friends who accept everything about you without judgments or criticisms. Then list your friends that can only accept this or that about you. And define what this or that is on this list. Very important. Why am I asking you to do this? Because you've never been this deliberate before. I want you to really think this through. Remember, connect with the right person at the right time about the right issue. If you are not discerning in your friendships, and this is an exercise in discernment, if you do not observe the energy exchange, if in your attempt to be vulnerable you tell the wrong person at the wrong time about the wrong issue, you're going to be shut down and criticized, humiliated, teased, and then you're going to tell yourself how bad vulnerability is and that you don't want to do that again. This experience will play right into the hands of the ego child's mind, who sees everyone as untrustworthy and who doesn't want to do a damn thing but what it's doing. Doesn't want to grow. Just wants you to be safe. Leave me alone. So you got to be honest with yourself here. And then take a good look at this list. And I want to read you something that Brene Brown says about friends. Okay. She says, avoid the following, maybe even drop the following. I say, I want you to see it. I want you to see it. I want you to see the friend who hears the story and actually feels shame for you. She gasps and confirms how horrified you should be. Then there's an awkward silence, and then you find yourself having to comfort her. Now, I don't know why Brene Brown says this in the feminine, because let me tell you, this isn't about gender. Men do this. They validate their ego child's mind points, just like women do. This is about awareness. It's not about gender. All right, she says, beware, number 2, of the friend who responds with sympathy. I feel so sorry for you, rather than they're responding with sympathy rather than empathy, which is, I get it, I feel for you, I've been there myself, okay? They're going to say, oh, you poor thing. Oh, she says there's also part of this that's incredibly passive-aggressive, and that is, bless your heart, bless your little heart. Diminishment all the way, right? Number 3, she says, beware of the friend who needs you to be the pillar of worthiness and authenticity. And again, she goes into the gender thing. She can't help because she's too disappointed in your imperfections. You have let her down feeling the way you have. The next friend she says be suspicious of, the suspect of, is the friend who is so uncomfortable with vulnerability that she scolds you. How did you let this happen? What were you thinking? Or she looks for someone to blame. Who is this guy? We'll kick his ass. Okay, number 5. Beware of the friend who is all about making it better and out of their own discomfort refuses to acknowledge that you can actually feel crazy and make terrible choices. All right? She'd say, again, gender, you're exaggerating. It wasn't that bad. You rock. You're perfect. Everybody loves you. You don't feel that way. Did your parents say that to you? Don't feel that way. Nobody has a right to tell you how to feel. That's yours. Number 6, according to Brene Brown, the friend who confuses connection with the opportunity to one-up you. That's nothing. Listen to what happened to me. This is much worse or much better. Whatever. Now, those things are from The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. I think they're very good. I think she has a lot to say to us. Oh, well, there it goes. All right. Exercise is not over. Here's what I want you to do. 5 minutes to tell you. I want you to now put all the family members on your list aside. I want you to not count them in what I'm going to ask you to count up. If your friend list, without family counted, is below 5 people, this week I want you to go out and investigate making a new friend. Many of us just don't have friends. And how are you going to be a participant? How are you going to connect? How are you going to exercise this lovely quality of vulnerability and trust if you don't go out and try to make one now? That's not to say in fantasy that you invite someone to coffee or lunch and declare them your best friend and go forward like that. No, no, no. That, ladies and gentlemen, lacks discernment. What I want you to do is ask someone to coffee or to lunch to investigate whether or not you both have anything in common to proceed with letting a friendship organically develop. Friendships, real ones, develop organically over time. There's a consistency here in how we treat each other. And by the way, if there isn't anything there to develop, invite somebody else for coffee, but you initiate. You initiate. You, who is always protective, you initiate. Ladies and gentlemen, we all need more friends. If you're one of those people who say you're too busy to have any, or that you have enough friends already, that you don't have time for, you're missing a big chunk of what makes life worth living, which is relationships. And to do them well, a higher level of vulnerability from the highest self. You should be concentrating on deepening your relationships of all kinds, making new ones. By the way, I'm not just talking about the intimate relationships that should be deepening. All your relationships should be deepening. You are part of the oneness with all life to which we all belong. The tragedy is sometimes we think we don't. And it is because of something closed within us that we can open. If you long to belong, and you should, unless the ego child's mind is telling you something different, I urge you this week to reach out with discernment, okay? With discernment. Guys, thank you so much for listening to the show. I'm sorry we're having all the technical troubles we are. We'll try to straighten these out before next week. I'll be here next week, Sunday, October 27th at 10 a.m. Hopefully we'll have a better technology experience. And I want to thank you for following and sharing and befriending and liking me and the show and the things we do here. What you can do for me is get the word out to help increase our listenership. So thank you so much for following, sharing, befriending, and liking and telling people. You know, picking up the phone and telling people about the show every Sunday morning. I appreciate it tremendously. Now, guys, have a wonderful week. I hope you will go out and make some friends, okay? See what kind of possibilities there are for you out there. That's a wonderful, safe step in the right direction. God bless all of you. And God loves you through you, so you treat yourself very well indeed, okay? Thanks for being with us.
90 seconds.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. Take care. Bye-bye.